A moment of mourning unfolding under the weight of politics. President William Ruto and the former Deputy President Gachagua came face to face today at a funeral that has drawn national attention. President William Ruto and former Deputy President met publicly on Wednesday, April 8, 2026, during the Requiem Mass at the late Kalou Member Parliament David Njuguna Kiaraho. The service, held in Nyandarua County, brought together political leaders, supporters, and residents in a solemn farewell, but beneath the mourning, there were clear signs of rising political tension ahead of the Kenya's 2027 general election. It was a day meant for remembrance, a day to honor the life and service of a fallen leader, but as mourners gathered to pay their final respects to David Njuguna Kiaraho, the atmosphere carried more than grief. There was a silence, there was respect, and there was politics, quiet, controlled, but unmistakable. President William Ruto arrived at the venue to join other leaders in the morning. The late legislator, whose death on March 29, 2026 left a gap in both the leadership and the community representation. Shortly after, the former Deputy President Gachagua also took the place among mourners, making one of the most closely watched public encounters between the two leaders in recent months. Their presence at the same venue at the same time drew attention across the country, not because of what was said, but because of what is represented. A relationship once defined by political partnership, now defined by distance. And yet, despite the underlying tension, there was calm. In the hours leading up to the Requiem Mass, Gachagua had already issued a public appeal. Speaking earlier in Nairobi during the unveiling of a candidate for the Democracy for the Citizens Party in the Emurua Dikir parliamentary by-election, he called for restraint. He urged his supporters and residents of Nyandarua to maintain decorum, to respect the office of the president, and to remember the purpose of the day. His message was clear, and this was not a political rally. This was not a battleground. It was a funeral, and it had to remain one. Gachagua emphasized that no leader, including the president, should face hostility during such a moment. He reminded supporters that political differences should not spill into spaces meant for mourning. At the same time, he made it clear that disagreements still exist and that those disagreements would find their proper place not in funerals but at the ballot box. That message carried weight, and because even as he called for calm, Gachagua did not hold back on his broader political stance. He pointed to what he described as unfulfilled promises by the current administration. Issues such as stalled infrastructure projects and including roads and electricity connections were raised as areas of concern. But even the tone remained measured. There were no calls for confrontation, no encouragement of disruption, and instead there was a deliberate effort to separate mourning from politics, at least in form, if not entirely in substance. The Requiem Mass itself proceeded in an atmosphere of order, and leaders sat together. Supporters watched quietly. Religious leaders led prayers and reflections focusing on the life of the legacy of David Njuguna Kiaraho, a man remembered for his service, for his role in representing the people of Kalou, and for the impact he had within his community. But beyond the ceremony, the political context could not be ignored, because this was more than just a funeral. It was a moment that reflected the shifting political landscape. And regarding Gachagua's presence at the event, despite calls from some quarters urging him to stay aware due to the expected attendance of the President, Ruto sent a message of defiance and a determination. He made it clear that no one could prevent him or his supporters from attending the burial of a leader they respected. And that stance aligns with the broader political strategy that has been unfolding in recent months, a strategy centered on consolidating influence within the Mount Kenya region, a region that remains critical voting bloc in Kenya's electoral politics. Gachagua has been actively engaging with communities across the region, holding rallies, appearing on local media, attending churches and also community gatherings, and increasingly funerals, spaces that hold a deep social and cultural significance. and through these engagements he has sought to position himself as a central political voice. At times, his messaging has been firm, drawing clear lines between allies and opponents, and at the same time, it has shifted towards reconciliation and coalition building, a balance between strength and outreach, between criticism and unity, and this evolving approach has not gone unnoticed. Political allies and observers have pointed to a growing momentum. One of those voices is Jeremiah Kioni, the deputy leader in the Jubilee Party. Following a recent political truce between the two leaders, Kioni has publicly acknowledged Gachagua's influence. He has suggested that the recent political developments have energized opposition politics in new ways, and that sentiment reflects a broader realignment taking shape within the political space, and where former rivals are finding common ground, and new alliances are beginning to form, all with an eye on the 2027 general election. Back in Nyandarua, however, the focus, at least on the surface, remained on mourning, on remembrance, and on paying tribute to a life lived in public service. Residents who attended the Requiem Mass came not for just politics, but to say goodbye, to stand with the family of the late MP, to honor his contribution, and to witness a moment that, while solemn, carried national significance, because in Kenya, funerals are more than private events. They are communal spaces, spaces where leaders meet the people, where messages are delivered, and sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, and where the political pulse of the nation can often be felt. On this day, that pulse was steady, calm, controlled, but present. The interaction between the President Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua remained within the bounds of protocol, where there were no public confrontations, no visible signs of discord, just two leaders standing in the same space, united, at least for the moment, but by the need of honor of a colleague. Yet the broader narrative continues to unfold. As Kenya moves closer to the next general election, moments like these are likely to carry even greater significance because they offer a glimpse into the relationships, tensions, and strategies that will shape the political future of the country. For now, the focus returns to the legacy of David Njuguna Kiaraho, a leader whose passing brought together both allies and rivals in a shared moment of reflection and in a rare pause from the intensity of political competition. And in the quiet of mourning, Kenya was reminded that leadership may divide, but in moments of loss, even the deepest differences can stand still. That is all from Kenya Lens Media, at least for now. If you're new here, consider subscribing, liking and sharing our content, and also helping us grow this platform. Hit the notification bell so that you can be receiving notifications each and every time we bring in a new content.